Today is the celebration of World Bee Day. So we're very excited to be speaking with Mr. Timothee on this day and to be speaking about bees. So again, thank you so much for joining us this evening, for taking some of your busy time to be with us this afternoon. Sorry for that pun. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with our questions, and we want to let everybody know that this is, we're doing this live. So please feel free to share any questions that you might have in the chat or in the question and answer. But these are questions that we're actually given by us from participants that signed up into this webinar. So we wanted to really respect that. So you might see your question in there, and we hope to address it. But if we don't, feel free to also share it via the question and answer or the chat. So the first thing that we're going to start talking with Mr. Timothee today is exactly this. What led you to beekeeping? What was the first thing that got you started? How did you get here?
Well, that's a very interesting question. The first thing that got me started, I was farming for years. Like, I think I was farming for about 8, 9 years. And I remember a few years ago, I was sitting in the living room with one of my friends, and he saw an ad came through on Facebook, and he said, looking for beekeepers or looking for participants to participate in a beekeeping program that the government wanted to get started. And I was talking to my friend. I was like, oh, they're interested in the beekeeping. And he was like, why don't you do it? Like, me, I don't do bees. I don't even understand anything about it. And so from that conversation on, I was like, you know what, let me go and sign up. Let me see what it was. A 2-day course. I said, let me go and start it up and see what it's all about, and I can get into it. After the first day of getting into beekeeping, doing the removal and seeing how bees work and the talks and the conversation, tasting honey, I was sold. I was like, I'm going to be doing that until I'm about 70, 80 years old. And I was sold from day one. And that's how I got into beekeeping. By pure accident, never had no intentions of doing it. I was solely into farming, but bees pretty much took over from that day, and that was it.
That's awesome. So it definitely kind of complemented within what you were doing in farming, and it's like, well, you know what? This is not a bad idea. Let's actually get into that.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell me a little bit about this picture. I'm interested in learning about what's going on here. Did you actually get started in beekeeping here?
Yes, I actually did. I remember when I first started beekeeping, the first thing I said to myself was that I'm doing farming, and farming is costing me or taking so much of my funds, and I want to focus on that. So I wanted to do beekeeping where it didn't cost me as much money. So my first thing was like, okay, how do I cut back on gas? I remember I used to work for the scooter company. And so my whole thing was like, how do I get into to find a scooter and basically maximize that way I wouldn't have to, during the removals, riding to and from and so forth. It had to have been less on gas. It had to have been efficient. It had to have been a way where I didn't need as much equipment. And that's pretty much what I started. So if you look on the scooter, you can see there's a vacuum on the very back. There's a small bucket vac. It's like a shop vac for me to suck up the bees and so forth. There's a box in the back of that scooter. And those were basically 4-frame boxes that I started off with. And the bucket was actually the bucket vac where you suck the bees and you put them into a basket. And the generator, most of the times when I went to most of these older buildings, or I had to remove more of the water meters and so forth, you didn't have any power, so you needed power. So the generator was a plus for me to have that generator in me at all times. And I also remembered most of the time when I would be driving past and the police officer would send me my full bee suit on because I have active bees on me, and they would stop and look at me like, what's going on here? And I said, well, I have bees right in the front of me right here, and I'm carrying them home. And he was like, get away from me. Get away from me. And so he would literally he would let me go just because I was carrying live bees. And when I pulled the basket out, you could see like millions of bees just going crazy. And they would just be like, no way, I'm gone. And they just pack up and left. So that scooter pretty much tells the story of how I started beekeeping in a nutshell.
And the trick to not getting tickets when you're driving a scooter.
That too.
That too. That's awesome. Well, that's really cool. That's a really cool story to hear. And I guess it really addresses that big, concern, right? You need all this equipment and you need all these things to get started. And we will talk about, what are the basic things you might need. But definitely, it's a matter of like really wanting to just jump at it and start working on it. Right?
See, the thing is, when I started it, I always thought about if I want to start, I wanted to keep about 2 or 3 boxes. So I didn't need an extravagant amount of equipment to keep 2 or 3 boxes. So by me starting with those small boxes and so forth, and taking the beeswax, taking on small colonies, I can get use and get some experience, and then I can transfer and get into into the big apron where I needed the equipment. But that was all I needed.
That's awesome. That's cool. I have a little bit of technical difficulties here, and my apologies if I have to do this for a second. I just couldn't see the question. There we go. Okay. And so what is the best way to get a hive started? I think you kind of answered that right now, right? Starting small?
It's starting small. If you're on the island, you're gonna basically have to get into bee removals. I think a lot of people think that we can bring in bees, but I think there's some sort of mandates where they don't allow you to bring in bees like that, especially bees, because a lot of them have diseases and so forth. So you have to go and capture wild bees. And if you want to get bees, you're gonna have to basically get into removals. And most of those equipment that I was showing you with the bucket and so forth, those are basically some of the best ways to basically start it on the cheap, to see if this is something that you want to get into, because it's not easy. And to get bees are, especially the bees on this island, they're not that nice. And so as you get into it, you're gonna understand, okay, as you get into a few stings, you're gonna understand, oh yeah, I can do it, or maybe this isn't for me, especially if you start swelling up like crazy.
So yeah, so definitely figuring out a way to get there slowly.
Yes.
Would be the best way to get a hive started and to get into removals.
Yes, removals is the best way to get bees.
That's fun.
One of the best ways, I should say. Now see, that's interesting. That bucket right there is pretty much what the bees were in. And so when you take the vacuum and the shop vac and you suck up the bees, you're cutting the suction down. So that when you cut the suction down, you're sucking the bees into that basket. And once you pull it out, you can see in the shadow, there's a basket that's there. And that basket is what you take and you pretty much dump the bees into the boxes. And once you find the queen, or if you wanted to find a queen, you put them into the box, and from there you can move on, and you guaranteed you can take the bees from point A to point B without being worried about them stinging people and so forth.
So there's a key there with the queen. I think we should talk about the queen later on. I think I might be about that for sure. And what are we seeing here?
See, that's exactly the picture I wanted to show as well too. So this is actually, if you look on the two top, those are baskets and they're filled with bees. And if you look, I put like that tape around the box to seal them into that box and so forth. And when I slide the doorway open at the bottom, the bees would slide down to the bottom. Most of them, they look for the brood and they look for a way out. So once they see the brood, they go inside of it and they pretty much live in that box. And you take the top piece off, the whole brown piece that's not painted, you take that off and you put the cover on top of the box and pretty much you got it from there.
And they're basically in their farm.
Instead of shaking them. That's another method instead of shaking them. And they pretty much go in there. That's an easier method to do it than compared to going inside I've seen videos online where people have like, they go through 1 million bees and you try to find the queen so you can get her to go in the box. That is too much work. And the time span that you're trying to get the bees, it's better for you to vacuum the bees slowly, take your time. And if you get all of the bees and you put them in a good box, you find that most of those bees tend to stay in that location.
So it's definitely an easier strategy than to be looking around for the actual
one bee. Yeah, that can hide.
That sounds easier, definitely. So in regards to bee boxes, can I place a bee box at home?
Depends. And why I say depends is because I've had experiences where I take a really, like, I remember the guy that taught me woodworking's carpentry skills. He wanted a bee box in his yard. So I put it in his yard and I remember putting it there, and you have to do inspections and go and check into the bees and so forth. When you open that box, the bees go crazy and they're flying around, and sometimes they'll sting dogs, they would sting goats, they would sting people, and you don't want that. So it all depends on if your property is big enough that you can actually put it in there. But I've created more methods that if you have the right type of box, not the regular Langstroth box, but if you have a right type of box, you can actually have them in your backyard, and you wouldn't disturb the whole colony, but you'd just be disturbing sections of the colony, like little small 2 frames and working the colony that way, instead of opening the box and the bees go crazy. So that's what I'm trying to prevent with a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now.
So let's actually.
So is it possible for you? Yes. So this is a prime example of some of the beehive boxes that I build now. So if I'm gonna put a beehive in someone's yard, I usually go for these 33 frame boxes that I built. They're pretty much a stack of 3 boxes, but you're just going sideways. And most people would generally say, Well, those boxes are not the typical way that you would find in more typical beekeepers. And I tell them commercial beekeepers are different from backyard beekeepers. If you're going to be a backyard beekeeper, you can actually use that one and put that in your backyard, and it'll still produce honey. Because if you go into somebody's house and you find the bees, they're actually in the suffix, they build straight across. They don't have another box to go on top and on top and on top and on top. They build straight across. And some of those, I've went into colonies before in someone's house. I found about $500 worth of honey that you're extracting out of someone's house. And they build straight across. So you don't necessarily need to stack up on top. You can find more practical ways to work it. And of course, like I say, I use those different boxes, but when it comes to being more practical and not and being careful and thinking about your neighbors and so forth, you might want to basically build stuff like this that has slots. You see the slots that's on top, and that basically you can pull out one slot at a time and work the bees, and you can close it without having to disturb the whole colony, because it can be pretty crazy.
So that's very interesting. It really depends on the model that you think. And like you say, like if you're thinking about backyards, then maybe this might be the best model you can maybe think about and work on.
Definitely.
So on that note, which types of bee boxes have you used, or do you recommend, and why?
I use about 3 to 4 different types of bee boxes. And like you saw the horizontal hive that I use right now, that's about 34 frame. I use them as well too. I use them. And those are when I tend to take bees into smaller colonies, and I put them into smaller boxes and I move them. So I have the Langstroth that I build. I have the horizontals. I have swarm traps that I build, like really deep swarm traps. So this is a perfect picture of one of the slots that I'm talking about and how much frames go into this box. And I started off with like small, little medium frames. And as it grew and as the beehive grew, I pretty much dropped it into deeper frames and so forth, just to get more honey out of it. So this is a horizontal hive horizontal box that I use. And that works really well for some of the stuff that I want to do, because I disperse my colonies around the island. And this is the reason why I love boxes like that.
That's awesome. And so these would be the different types that you mentioned, right?
Yes. So it all depends. Now, these are the 2 typical I start with, and I'll say start with. When I say start with, if I go into a hive and I usually bring 2 of these boxes along. If the hive is a small hive, I use the 5 frame box. It's a yellow box right here. If it's a bigger colony and it's a really, and there's a lot of brood and comb and so forth, I would use a 10 frame box or a 9 frame box like this one, like a 10 or 9 frame box that I usually tend to build. And so they would start them here, and I would start them from that point where I start feeding them. And when they get to the point where I see they try to increase in size, I would move them into the horizontal boxes where it's more bigger and so forth. They have that space to work with.
So definitely the colony is going to keep growing. So thinking about where to continue moving them before they actually do separate, right? That wouldn't be ideal.
Yes, because you don't want them to swarm, so you want to give them more space. You can go up. I tend to have boxes where I tend to go up from time to time, but most of the times I build boxes predominantly for that. I love this picture here. This picture is actually Lena. This is actually a queen that I produce and I have in someone's backyard right now. I grow my own, I raise my own queens. So what I did was I was doing removals and I was putting the bees in small frames. And when I put them in small frames, I would actually take them, put them in a big box. And once they basically established and they settled, I would take them, find eggs and so forth inside the colony. And I would put 3 frames inside the same little box right here. And I would feed them that top with the brown piece right there. That's where you put a bag of sugar syrup and so forth. So the bees would build and build. And I remember at one point with the same colony right here is that I thought that it wasn't building fast enough. So I took 2 weeks and I didn't get back to it. They literally started building on the top box and it was all over the place. It was a disaster inside that box. And I had to cut them out and put them into a 10 frame because that's how fast they built. And they took that box over in no time. So those baby nooks, they work really well if you want to raise queens. So if you're trying to increase your numbers for colonies, that's one of the best ways that you can actually do it.
So there's definitely boxes for different purposes. So it would be a matter of really
Yes.
knowing what are you wanting to do, if it's to increase production, if it's to raise your queens. I think it's really a matter of like really identifying what do you want to like dive into too, right?
Yes, definitely.
That's awesome. So speaking of, getting the bees and working around bees, what would you advise exterminators when they get calls about bee problems?
Call a beekeeper. We have, I think for years, we've been so accustomed to calling exterminators just to kill bees, and we've been doing that for years. But there has been a few people on the island that's been like helping out and so forth, but it's never enough. But now we have a more influx of beekeepers. I recommend, especially with exterminators, if you know beekeepers, and I know some exterminators, the minute when they get a few jobs, they would say, Luck, I have a beehive here. Can you come and remove it? I have the time. I'm going to go and remove it. So they would call me and I would go and remove it. And they have other beekeepers on the island that they would do the same thing. So any exterminators that find a bee problem and you want to get rid of it or to someone home or wherever it is, call the local beekeepers. A lot of them wouldn't mind taking those beekeepers, and it actually builds some of their apiary. So that's a good thing in order to get exterminators. And what I like about it is that the exterminator that I was working with is that, which was kind of the downside, but I would tell them, when I first started, I would say, okay, tell me where the bees are. I would go and remove them and you make the money. So he was making the money and I was just removing the bees and building and building and building. And he gained a lot because I removed a lot of colonies from, and after a while I was like, this deal is not working out too well. So you're on your own. But he wanted the funds for all the bees he removing. And I did the removals and he took the money. I did the removals, but because I was trying to build experience, I literally had to go off on a whim, and almost for a year I was doing that where I was just removing bees, and he was making the money off of it because he had the established company and he was getting the calls, and I couldn't beat that. I could not beat that. I needed the experience to get there, to put in the work and then go it. So exterminators, definitely called beekeepers. You will find crazy beekeepers like me that would remove beehives out of someone's house for free, but not always.
And it could work around the other way, right? If you're a beekeeper, if you're interested in starting beekeeping, try to contact the exterminators because they are the ones who are getting the calls, right? And you can definitely work around the deals like Luckner did, definitely. But now that's one of the things that you do the most, right? At this point, independently, you do a lot of bee removals. Is that something that is worthwhile in terms of like economically speaking?
Yes, it is. I got into it and I didn't think that, I thought the honey was where all the money was at. But now I literally, I charge from $150 to $175 per removal. And that removal might take me like about 5 hours to remove a beehive out of someone's house. It all depends on how difficult the job is. And I can't name much jobs that'll pay you $175 for 5 hours right now. Especially in these times, you can get into this and do it if you have the time, you can do it almost every other day. And I make some really good money. It's like, I remember one job I did it for almost $400 or $500. Depends on where you go. Removals can bring in a lot of money. Depends on the difficulty of the job, the amount of equipment that you have to borrow or rent or so forth. You can make a whole lot of money off of it. Some people charge upwards of $1,200 to remove beehives.
Wow. So that's definitely a win-win there, right? A win for you because you can diversify your income, a win for nature and for the bees, and definitely a win for any beekeeper or farmer that is interested in acquiring these because you can also sell them, right? Once you put together the beehive and the whole bee box, you can resell the whole thing to a farmer that might be interested in these. So there's definitely a whole loop there that you can work around, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've gotten into the thing of selling bees now. So there's a lot of people that usually I get the bees and I would feed the bees and I start to get them to the point where I know that they wouldn't leave the boxes and so forth. And so what I find is that I go out and some people there's a few folks that contact me for bees and I would sell them. You can sell a bee box for about maybe $300-400 if you want to. And people are buying it. If someone wants to get into it, they'll basically pay the money for it. So there's a market for it.
You heard them. There's a market for it, and
there's a market
for nature too. So it's a win-win. That's awesome. That's great. And there we have some pictures of Luckner in action. That is very lovely. A very lovely box.
That was an aggressive beehive right there. That beehive was, that was bad.
So let's talk a little bit about if you want to have just bees kind of going around your yard, if you have maybe a garden, a backyard garden, what would be maybe the best plants or the best species that you could have around?
I found a lot of I have a rose apple or wax jambu. That's a rare fruit tree or like an apple tree that I have in the bees love that. You have bananas. They love bananas. They love shepherd needles. They love sea grapes. They love there's almost any weed that you can actually find in your backyard. Bees love that stuff. So most people like to cut their lawn constantly. Bees love the flowers. Any kind of flowers that you can plant, the bees will enjoy. So I would recommend any flowers that you want to get into or you want to plant in your backyard to bring flowers, not most of the ornamentals, but flowers wise, bees have no problem with it, especially fruit trees. So if you can plant fruit trees, my favorite is coconut trees. So if you got coconut trees or most palm trees, bees love them. They flock to them like crazy. So palm trees is always a plus.
That's definitely a good one. You can see them going all around those.
Oh yeah.
Those flowers. I've also read about keeping like certain areas of your yard kind of like wild, because like you mentioned, a lot of the wild flowers that you already have in your yard might be great for them. So like keeping little like areas that are kind of like kept wild would be also something to work around. So great work about that. Okay, so let's talk about how to get down to this. What are the basic tools that you might need to start as a beekeeper? And now I think we have a little demo. So let's take out the little screen so we can take a look at Luckner. So what would be, Luckner, the basic tools that you need to kind of get started with this?
There are some experienced beekeepers that don't use this, but I would recommend that if you're just starting, use it. A bee suit. Use a bee suit. I say a lot of experienced beekeepers don't use these because they're more comfortable with them. But if you're just starting out, and the amount of sting, I remember when I first started, the amount of stings that I got from bees, I almost sit down and wanted to cry. So I would always recommend for anyone who's getting into this and this is your newbie, get a bee suit. You can get a jacket. They're usually about, I think about $120 or so forth. You can buy one of these and basically keep them with you, and you can do checks or removals and so forth. Wear a long pair of jeans. If you can, baggy jeans preferably, because if you don't, they're gonna sink their stingers into those pants and they're gonna get at you. The second thing that I always recommend is a smoker. This go a long way. I have this for a long time and I love this. If I'm gonna do a removal, I tend to want to calm the bees down. So the smoker is definitely a plus to get into it. The next thing that I would say is a bee brush. If you're gonna be working your combs and so forth, 2 pairs of pants is good too. Yeah, that's true. You can actually do that. But I tend to love more thicker pants, so I tend to go with a thicker jeans or some Dickies, some really baggy Dickies. They work really well for me. A bee brush and a hive tool. These hive tools for prying your frames and so forth, or cleaning it or whatever. This hive tool is really going to be a plus. And the bee brush, if you want to take bees off of the combs and so forth, if you want to brush it, you want to do that. And definitely, I would recommend gloves. Now, I'm showing you 2 pairs of gloves. This glove I use for only removals, and this glove I use for just going inside of a regular colony and so forth. So if you want to get into it, I would say, if you're going to be doing removals the way I do removals and some big colonies, this is so thin that bees would sting through it and they tend to get through it. So if you want to, I recommend get more thicker gloves and then attach the back piece of this onto your glove. Just go with any seamstress and they would attach it on for you, and that works really well. So thicker gloves and gloves. Those are the ones that I recommend that anyone, if you're going to get into beekeepers, get into that. Get into beekeeping. Definitely get those stuff. That's a start. And then you have frames and so forth. I don't think I have any frames on me. You have frames and bee boxes and so forth, but we're going to get into that as we go. But those are going to be the first stuff that I'm going to recommend people get into. Getting, if you're going to start it, get these equipment if you're going to start like brand new. Like tomorrow, if you're going to start it, get those equipment before you do it. And another prime example of, I had a gentleman just bought a colony from me. And I told him before he opened that box, go and buy these equipment right here. Like get your smoker, get your hive tool, get a bee brush, get some other little like beetle busters and so forth in order to basically help you with the colonies and so forth. But definitely get protective gear. That's important. That is important. Or you're gonna pay for it.
Oh yeah, you gotta pay for it. I've been looking at the chat. I've seen a lot of action. Thank you so much for that interaction. We have people from St. Croix. We have people from Bahamas. We have a great crowd this evening. Let me check out the questions. I believe we have an open question and we might be able to go into it. Oh, I think you already are answering that. We have Christina asking, how often do you go into your boxes? Maybe we can answer out loud so everybody can hear that one out.
Okay, well, okay. I go into depends. It all depends. And the reason why I say depends, I have some weak colonies. If I find that my colonies are weak, like some really new colonies that I bring in and they're basically struggling, I would check them once a week. If these are strong colonies, like I find a medium strong, like those 10 frame boxes, I would go into them every 2 weeks. And some of my bigger colonies, like those massive ones that I have, those 33 frame ones, I go into them maybe once every 6 weeks because they can defend themselves. The only thing I would need to go into them, if I see that there's a real influx of pollen or they really have a lot of stuff out there and it's summer, like in the spring, like how we've been from January, February, March, and so forth, I can see there's a lot of stuff for them to consume. I would more or less give them more frames and I wouldn't have to go in there as often. So I cut, depends on the colony. If the colony is big and it looks like it can defend itself, I go into it less. I spend less time going into it. I think disturbing the bees, if you can disturb the bees less, it's less work for them to mend all that stuff back together. And what I mean by every time you crack the box, they have to properlize that box back again. And so that's more work for them to do and so forth. So the less you can lessen the box, the stronger colonies, the better. They can just go into what they normally do. So it all depends on the size of the colony. That's when I tend to find I'll go into the bees more. And if it's a bigger colony, I go into it less.
That's awesome. And we have a little bit of a chat about swarms. I know that's one thing that you really want to avoid. So I think checking on them constantly prevents that. What do you recommend for farmers that might have, or beekeepers that might have colonies or boxes that can swarm?
Well, that's the tricky part because bees are the thing that they do is bees swarm and they collect honey. That's like some of the natural thing that they're gonna do no matter what. Now you can go into it constantly, be going into it, trying to prevent them from doing it. But bees are gonna swarm no matter what. Sometimes you're gonna catch it, sometimes you won't. I tend to find it, I just want to leave the bees in its natural state as much as I can. So if they want to swarm, let them swarm. Sometimes I catch them. Sometimes I catch a swarm happening and I can say, oh, that colony is big enough. Or let's say, for instance, like a few weeks ago, I spent 8 hours on my bee yard. And what I was doing, I was going through it frame by frame, checking for queen cells. And if I found any, I would take it out. But I'll be back into that colony another maybe 5 weeks or 6 weeks from now. And if they swarm, that's okay. That's what bees are going to naturally do. And then they're going to build it back up again. And what I tend to do is I put out swarm traps, a lot of swarm traps, so that bees can I can catch another swarm. So you're not going to prevent them from doing it completely. That's how they multiply. That's how they multiply. That's how they spread their genetics. So you're not going to prevent them from doing it. So the best thing you can do is put swarm traps around to help them actually swarm, and you can actually catch another swarm and build your colonies. And I'm finding swarm traps, like I have bee traps in my apiary, and they're catching swarm traps right now. They're catching bees right now.
So it's a matter of like kind of contrasting the swarms with the swarm traps that you might have.
Yes.
Around.
Yes.
We do have a follow-up question about the kind of swarm traps do you use, Christina? We will be getting to that shortly. We actually have some pictures even. So let's actually get back to that and we can jump into the rest of the questions. Thank you everybody for being so active. We don't feel lonely at all right now in this webinar. So keep it up, keep it up. Let's continue on. And sorry, my technical difficulties here. Here we go. All right. So basic tools. And so let's talk about, I think we kind of
we gotta cover that. Yeah.
Into a little bit about like other products and services that you can provide in addition to your honey, but about your honey. How much does your honey cost and what are the sizes that you average, sell?
I usually keep mine at an 8 ounce and I usually sell it for $10. So I have an 8 ounce bottle that I tend to sell for $10. Generally people go for like $1 an ounce for honey. So you can go, because I'm buying the plastic bottles and so forth, I keep it at the $10 range, but I keep it at the 8 ounce bottles. Now, I have bottles where I have certain clients that want like big jars of honey. And so what I do is I would sell them for like $175 for the jar. And so like a big plastic container would be with honey in it. But those are for like special clients that want big jar and they can't consume anything else. So I tend to find myself catering to those people who can't consume sugar and so forth. So I would bring it to like diabetes and so forth. So I tend to cater to more of those clients.
Interesting. And I know you work around extending the life of the honey in some sense. Can you talk about what other products you've been testing out and developing with honey?
That's I like that you said that. One of the things I'm doing is like honey dressing. So I'm basically working on a dressing in order to, so those are the 8-ounce bottles that I use, and I sell them in those 8-ounce bottles. But what I do is I'm creating honey dressing. I'm using that as one of the like main things. I find a lot of people eat salads and they want to find a dressing that they can use. So you creating a honey dressing for that, and then I have the butter spread. So the honey spread to put on some of your toast and so forth. I'm working on that as well too, and basically getting that into that. So those are the two things that I'm basically jumping into to basically do.
That's awesome. So definitely extending the life of honey. You only have so much honey you can kind of harvest in a year. So I think those are great ideas to kind of extend the life of the honey for sure. This is, I think, a more philosophical question. How to be productive while sustaining a small footprint? I think within beekeeping, you're already doing a good job with that. What do you think?
I think so. The thing is, I think helping your environment as much as you can and leaving a smaller footprint. For instance, I think nature-wise and working with bees and helping the environment, for me, I think that's where I can actually contribute. Because I always love having chickens. I always love having animals and so forth. And that actually helps the environment a lot. So for me, my footprint is going to be helping the next colony of bees basically get into the environment and doing what they're supposed to do, so that when we have for instance, we have mangoes in season right now, and you have different fruits coming in, you would want to be helping in that retrospect, to helping the creatures to move forward and then helping the environment get more sustainable. So that's where my footprint is, I think, and especially with farming and going green as much as possible, because I want to get into solar and wind and so forth, like solar panels and windmills and so forth for the household. So those are the things that I'm pushing into going and leaving a smaller footprint.
I definitely agree. And I think what you said about the way you've been thinking through how you build your boxes as a way to really kind of not even interrupt the bee's natural cycle, I really admire that, to kind of even think in that sense, right? To make it as natural as possible, even within human intervention, right? Because we are building their houses anyway.
Yes.
So that's awesome. That's cool that you have that in mind too. How do you identify areas in your land to move bee boxes? Where would you locate them? Where would you think be best?
I think I'm playing with different methods, and I'll explain that better. I find that for the couple of years that I've been working my bees, if you're gonna leave them out like in the heated areas, you find that bees bear it a lot. So they come out of the colony and they pretty much try to find the colony and find it to keep the hive, to bring some air in there. And I think that's one of the issues. So what I do right now, one of the 25-acre lot that I have it in almost make a path in there, and I have all my bees within the lot, and it's almost like a forest, and it's keeping the bees cool. So you find it's less likely that you're gonna, yes, this is one of the areas right here where there's so much trees and lush bush in that area, or lush forest in that area, where you have less chances of the bees having to worry about being in the open sun and it's so hot. And I think that's one of the things we deal with our climate-wise. When I'm talking it gets hot, it gets hot. I have a nursery in the back here, and a lot of sun tend to be on those bees, and those beehives in the back there, you always see at least half or maybe even more of the colony sitting on the outside, just hanging out and trying to find the colony at the same time. So I'm trying to lessen that to see if I can get the bees to work more and do what they normally do instead of having to come out of there. Because if you look at nature, it's very rare that you're going to find, from what I've seen anyway, it's very rare that you see all the bees on the outside just hanging out and so forth. They usually stay within the colony. So that's one of the things that I'm pushing for. So if I'm going to find a good area, I find a cooler spot, a cooler area. You would find bees go into someone's suffix because they know that's going to be a nice shaded area or so forth. Even the water heater, like I've seen them in water heaters. I've seen them in different areas where bees are going to try to find the best shade that they can do, and they can go to work. So the more shade, the better for these colonies.
Awesome. So looking for shaded areas, forested areas would be a good ideas around your area or your farm. Good. Well, this one, I think someone was also talking about within the chat. What skills do you need for being a successful beekeeper?
Patience. That's number one. Because you're going to get let down a lot. And the second thing is, I would tell anybody that's getting into beekeeping, develop your carpentry skills first. When I first started my classes with the government, with the program that the government did, the first thing I did when I noticed it, I looked at it and I was like, okay, what is the most costliest thing that we have in the beekeeping industry? And the boxes were the most expensive. And so for me, when I looked at it, I was like, okay, I don't want to be buying a $350 box or a $125 box. And by the time I import it into the country, it's almost $200, maybe $600 for the boxes. So my whole thing was like prime example, this is a three frame box. Hey, don't close the door, please. Sorry, 1 second, George. I'm doing something right now.
So lock it in.
What I do is that this 3-frame boxes that I have right here. What I tend to find with a problem with that is that it's almost $358. That's too much money for that. So if you're going to be a small beekeeper that's going to be doing it in the backyard, you don't want to basically be buying. That's too much money to spend for the beginning. So, but with these boxes right here, it's almost a it's almost like a 3-stack boxes, but it's going straight across. And what you can do is you can basically build that. I can build out of 2 sheets of plywood and some pieces of 2x4, less than maybe $150. So you can save a lot of money. And if you build some of the smaller boxes, I can build 3 or 4 boxes with probably maybe 3 boxes, 5-frame boxes with 2 sheets of plywood, with 1 sheet of plywood. So it all depends on getting your carpentry skills. That is going to be the most handiest thing or the most effective skill that you're going to be able to use. That I think is one of the best ones that you can do, is working on your carpentry skills.
Boom. So you got it. And I think someone else had mentioned it. I think it was Christina in the chat. So definitely validate it. Get your carpentry skills on.
Yeah, definitely learn to make those bee boxes and the frames.
That's awesome. That's really cool to see, right? The whole concept of like, you can do this, but this, and for half the price. And
yeah, if you're in the US, I would say no, because it's cheap. But if you live on an island, it's different, where you have to import a lot of this stuff. Then you basically, you need to build a lot of stuff. You're going to just get into it at the beginning stage.
You know, it's the same thing for us here in Puerto Rico. Our beekeepers here are basically carpenters too. So I can fully attest to the fact, for sure.
Yeah. And the last thing I would put with that is that if you're going to be building, I find that I wouldn't build the frames, but I would build the boxes, because the frames are time consuming and very intricate. I would only build them on certain instances of my baby notes and so forth. I build the frames for all that. But when it comes to these boxes, sometimes it's just better just to buy the frames. It's less stress, I find. You don't want to spend so much time all day building frames when you can just buy the frames and so forth and bring them in, especially when the government have exemptions for farmers and so forth. You can utilize that to your advantage. Now, there's certain give and takes you can play with, or you can find someone on the island that'll build them for you, because I build boxes for beekeepers on the island.
So finding someone that can help you with the frames is definitely a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, down to Christina's question. How do swarm traps work, and are they effective? Let's talk about swarm traps. And I know we have a couple questions around, and we will get to them. We're halfway into ours. So once we finish the ones in the presentation, we will jump back into the questions we have. Please continue sharing them, because we will get to all of them, okay? So continue on with the swarm traps. Let's talk about that.
Now, swarm traps is something that I am getting into heavily right now. And when I say heavy, I'm heavy into swarm traps. I believe in swarm traps. And the reason why I believe in swarm traps are pretty much like, now this is a swarm trap that I just recently built. Of course, most of the material was sponsored by WCK. So I'm getting into that. And I'm basically using some of those materials and the lumber and so forth to build these boxes. And what I love about these swarm traps is that we call them swarm traps, but they're just pretty much bait boxes. So the bees are constantly looking for different places to live. And if you can provide a really great home for them, they will go into these boxes and they would actually go in them, and it would be less stress. So for instance, some of the swarm traps I use are like the baskets. I use baskets and so forth. They're like these tree stumps that be like this one right here that I have in the picture. I use them. They are really, really good, but most of the times you have to cut out the comb and so forth in order to get the bees in the box. You're disturbing them. So what I found with these swarm traps is that I would put some of my mini frames. I built small frames, and I would put it inside there, and I would take a strip of wax, and I would strip it on the inside, and I would put that bait box over there. And the bees are more likely with Swarm Commander, some of the swarm layer that I put inside of it, and the bees would go inside there, and they would start to build on those frames. So when you come and take them out, you actually can pull it out and put them on another frame, because they're small, and the bees will go and build into it. It's less cuddles, less disturbing the colony. The less you can disturb the colony, the better. So if you can modify some of these swarm traps, I think that's a plus. So that's where I find that swarm traps are very effective. And for this year, I think I've caught about maybe 5 or 6 swarms so far. That's not doing any removals. That's not going in someone's house and spending 5 hours trying to remove them or whatever. I literally go up in there, pull that down, put it inside a box and take it home with me. And that's another hive right there. Less work. It was literally no work at all that went into it. Compared to if you have to go and remove it into someone's house and so forth. So what I do is I work on with the community that I have. So I have a lot of friends on island. I would call my friends like Mr. Joe Dabble that has this property right there. I say, do you mind me putting a swarm trap on your property? No, I have no problem. It's going to help the bees. Yeah, it'll help the bees because I can, instead of them going to your house and you have to call an exterminator or me to come and disturb it, they would go inside of these boxes or the swarm traps. And then what we do is I come and I take it, remove it and whatever. I make a more likely place that they would love to live. And then we remove them and bring them into the apiary. It's more better for them and it's easy on us. So those are the more cost-efficient ways of swarm traps and working with them. They really work. I've seen them work really well.
I just want to say I love this. I think this is an amazing concept. And overall, it's just great. It serves as even as an educational tool, right? Because you're putting these around, people are like, what the heck is this? Yes, this actually even helps you, right? It will even prevent a swarm from getting into your house because you have all this. I think this should be something that we should all implement in all of.
And that's one of the things. So the goal for this year, my goal is to have about 50 of them out. So I'm working on trying to get 50 of them out there. And what I do is if I can get 50 of them out there, it's the likelihood of those bees going there. If I was to catch, let's say 10 to 20 swarms within those boxes, that's a good success rate add on to the removals that I do on a weekly basis. So you can build an apiary very fast with swarm traps. And I saw someone talking about nukes. You can actually use a nuke. The reason why I use nukes and I use those bigger boxes because you can get bigger colonies. If you have a big swarm that's moving up and they find those nukes, they would go into them and they would scout it out. Sometimes the colony is just too big for that box and they would know they have to scout very soon. So the bigger boxes, or you can use the baby nukes for smaller colonies. And some of the bigger boxes that I have, I usually put them out. And one of the things I love about building my own box is that I have been on certain jobs where I needed a box like right away. I needed a box like right away, ASAP. So I would be like, where do I have my boxes? I would look on my phone, swipe into my phone. Oh, there's a box at Joe Dabble's yard. And I would go into there, see if there's any bees in it, pull the box down, go take that box, do it or removal with it, and then put another box there the next day. So you can actually take that same box and use it around for the bee yard as well too. And if you go back to the previous picture, there's the box is actually separated into 2. So that bottom piece is just a cavity, and the top piece is where the bees pretty much they would go and live. And what I do is I pretty much I use a strap to strap it onto a platform, and I would break it apart, and I would lift that top piece off and take it and put on another box. This is how it works. I would take the front piece, that's the entrance right there, unscrew that, and I would take that bottom piece off, drop it off if there was bees in it, and I pretty much let that become a colony and leave it there and put another top piece on it as well too, and that's continue to cycle over and over again. So those swarm traps, they work really, really well, especially if you can build them.
That's awesome. That's super, super cool. I know we have more questions and comments about this. Some people excited. We have a question about the swarm bait that you use. What's it called?
The bait that I use is Swarm Commander. There's a few things I use. One, the first thing I try to make sure that's in that box is propolis. What I do is, like, for instance, I had a beehive that moved into a bucket. Like, the bees literally would move into buckets if you put buckets around. So if those locations are good, they would use it. And when the bees put the propolis into the bucket, I took the bees out of the bucket and I broke the bucket into pieces. And I would literally take the bucket, small pieces of the bucket, and I would put it inside there because the smell actually attracts the bees and tells them, oh, there's been bees living here before, so I would like this area. So they would go and inspect it, and it smells like propolis. The second thing that I use a lot of is a Swarm Commander. So I would take a little bit of a Swarm Commander, spray it on a Q-tip, and I put it in a Ziploc bag, open the Ziploc bag, leave it open. not zipping it up, but open it and just leave it inside there. And then that's that lemongrass scent that the Swamp Commander actually has. It attracts the bees to come and inspect the box and so forth, and they would go and live in those boxes. So those are the two things that I usually push. And the third thing that I do I've never seen most people doing this, is I would take a sheet of I think they called it you know, the mats that you put for the kitchen, like the table that you let your food sit on, like those you can use yoga mats. I've used yoga mats before. That's kind of funny, but I use yoga mats or placemats. You can take placemats and you can put it on top of your colony. The bees would actually take the propolis and start to glue it onto the colony. And what you do is you pull it off. And once you pull it off, you can actually cut that into pieces and put it inside of your boxes. And they pretty much, that smell is really, really good for them. So that attracts, and that's one of the methods that I've used. I haven't seen much people doing that, but I love that method as well.
So a couple of suggestions. You can also use some old top bars from other hives.
Yes, old frames.
I've heard our beekeepers here use lemongrass too, lemongrass oil, like the essential oil.
Yes, that works.
That's another one that I've heard people use here.
The Swamp Commander is like lemongrass oil.
Yeah, that's, I think, wasn't one of the main ingredients in there. Let's see what else I know we have some more questions, but I want to continue on because we do have a little bit more to touch on before we jump into all the questions we have around. We will get to them. So what is your preferred method for harvesting the honey from the frames?
I use an extractor. I bought my extractor. I think the extractor works for if they're in frames, because you want to basically spin that extractor so that you can get the honey out of it, and you can take that same frame and you can pretty much put it inside of the colony again. They go right back into putting honey inside of it. That's one if you're going to get out of the frames. Now for extractions, that's a little different. The difference between that is what I do is if you're going to get them out of a wild hive, what I did is I built this small table here, and this is actually a food press. It's an apple press. So what people tend to do is they have them inside, and you would actually put apples inside of it, and you would squeeze and press the apple really well. You put it in the screen, and then the juice is squeezed. But you can actually take comb or honeycomb, put it inside a cheesecloth, and you can squeeze it, and that's the best way. I saw an Italian beekeeper using it on Instagram. Blew my mind. I was like, oh my God. And that was 2 years ago. I was like, Susie, come here. You need to see this. You need to see what this guy's doing. You need to see what this guy's doing. He's using a food press to actually squeeze honey. I never saw anyone do it. And the next day we actually ordered off Amazon. And the most popular way I find people do extractions is they use their hands. They put on gloves and they squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, and that is very tiring. Sometimes you go in the colonies, it's so big, you'll be squeezing honey for hours. I hated it. I used to, as a matter of fact, one of the things I used to do when I first started, I would have one of my friends and I would be like, listen, you can take a bottle of honey, just squeeze all this honey for me. I don't have the energy to continue this. So you just basically squeeze the honey, take a bottle out of it, and I'll sell the rest and so forth. But this honey press, with this food press, or this food press right here, it works really, really well. That's awesome. Why I designed a table for it and everything. An apple press. It's an epic idea. Yes, it is.
You've got some kudos there on your comfort shoe skills, Mr. Timothee. There you go. I'm so excited. I'm very happy all this interaction is happening, and you guys can actually pick on your ideas and your brain. So super excited that all this is happening. This is a good question. What is the weirdest place that you've removed a beehive from?
Out of a water heater. I think that might be my top one. Like, I had to sit down. I call it the weirdest place because it was the most difficult. I had to sit down and with a grinder and literally cut into this water heater. And I thought it was just a little small colony. This hive has been in that water heater because it was sitting on the backyard. This hive was in this colony for years. It was one of the biggest colonies I've seen in a while. And having to use the grinder to cut it out, and the bees just physically going crazy and so forth, it was ridiculous. I think that was one of the hottest and one of the weirdest places I had to remove a beehive. I've seen them in bathrooms and in the ceilings and so forth, but that doesn't take the cake compared to the water heater. That was the worst one.
That sounds definitely like an interesting challenge right there. Yeah, we've had experiences also in the USVIs with water heaters. So it seems like they do like that.
Yeah. It's a small cavity. So it's a small area to get inside, and there's a bigger cavity on the inside. So they love it.
That's definitely it. Okay, so how do you minimize in regards to definitely those kind of criteria? How do you minimize the effects or remove moss from your hive? What would be
See, that's a tricky thing because when wax moth is in season, unless your colony is very strong, you're gonna lose a lot of your colonies to wax moth. You're like that's one of the things I think beekeepers been fighting forever. What I do is that if I find that I have a weak colony, I tend to have these an old stove, an old refrigerator, water pump. I've been there. I've been in all of them. On the trailers, buckets. Listen, you name it, they go inside anything. But back to the wax moth issue. You would find that I found that if you make the entrance smaller for weaker or smaller colonies, if you make the hole smaller, the bees are more likely to defend that box. Like prime example with this is that sometimes you find boxes that have really big entrances, or you can make a small entrance for the little small colonies. And so I make that. You find a few bees, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 bees can defend that. Compared to if you have a really big entrance, long entrance, the bees are very big. They can't defend it. It's too much for a little small colony to defend. So that's why what I do is I typically start with some of the smaller colonies. I start them in 5 frame boxes. And once they get to the point where they can defend it, and I feed them and I keeping them active and so forth, then they pretty much can go from the bigger colonies. Once they then build that up and there's enough bees, they put them in the bigger box, and I increase the size. And when they get into those super boxes that I build, that's when I give them that big entrance that they can really utilize. So you need to take that into effect. That the smaller colonies, you might want to give them, if it's not enough bees, give them smaller holes or small entrances, because if you find them in trees and so forth, or someone's house, it's just a little hole that they start off with. That colony go in there into a little hole, and then they pretty much know that this is what I can defend. This is the best that I can do right now to defend until we build our numbers, and then you can increase it bigger into a bigger size hole and so forth, or different box.
So definitely making it easier for them to defend their hive is what you're saying.
Yes.
That's awesome. Now that we're heading into hurricane season, I think this is a really relevant question. What should you do before, during, and after a hurricane with your hives? Any recommendations?
Wow. For me, I have lost about 30 colonies during Dorian. So I know what this is. I've experienced it. So what I've done like this for the time when we start since Dorian is that I pick certain spots on island. I tend to pick high areas. And the reason why I pick high areas is because I remember the flooding. When the flooding came, it washed away all my boxes. I couldn't even find the boxes anymore. So that was complete loss. I had to start over from scratch building boxes and so forth. So I find high areas. Another thing that I'm doing right now is that instead of putting all of my colonies in one location, I'm dispersing them around the island. So what I find is that I'm putting if I find some of my friends who want me to put hives on their colony on their big backyards and so forth, I would put 3 here. I would put 10 on another location. I would put 5 on this location and disperse them around the island. And another thing that you can do is you can strap them down. So if you can basically strap a lot of your colonies down, that can help as well. But for my thing, I think don't put all your don't put all your eggs in one basket. Yeah, I'm losing this now, but don't put all your eggs in one basket, because you can have the weather can come from one area and you can lose everything. So if you have them dispersed around the island, then definitely that's a plus. You don't have to put a lot. You can have I have 15 at one location, and then I'm dispersing them around the island, different areas, so that I can have something to save for. The last thing that I've been doing is this: when a bad hurricane is coming, I'm literally going to some of my bigger boxes that I'm expecting. Say we have a bad hurricane this year, I'm going to them. I'm breaking those colonies into smaller boxes and the smaller nukes. And I'm taking them and I'm putting them inside the trailer, and I would basically let them sit in the trailer until the storm passes, and I'll bring them back up. So that's another thing that you can actually do to basically help during the hurricanes. And sometimes I've seen some videos of trailers floating down the wave, so that could potentially happen as well. But you can put some of those assurances in place, and hopefully that helps you a lot.
Those are all great suggestions. And I think I speak for all of our island nations. I know our partners in the USVIs, I see there Grantley talking about how he lost 87 hives in Maria. That's a lot. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
that's a lot. That's
Definitely the experience across, Puerto Rico as well. Our beekeepers lost a lot of the hives. So, thinking about these things in advance and prepping, I think it really serves all those experiences we've had, right? And we can use them as growth and to prep in advance, right, for future occasions. Let's hope that we don't have to do that anytime soon, but definitely thinking it in advance.
And the funny thing is, what I've been doing as recently is that, like, now I'm telling my mom and my stepdad and my brother, like, we live together. I'm telling them I want them out of the house because I want to put the bees in the house, and then we just go and rent a hotel and stay at a hotel and so forth. So that's another. I don't recommend people do that, but that's one of the things I'm pushing now. Like, get out of the house, let me put my bees in the house, and then I'll be the one that give me a week. Let me go, and if the bees or the flip over, whatever, I'll deal with the bees inside the house, and then y'all can come back a week later afterwards when I sort all this stuff out. I am trying anything to save my colonies. Like, I'm not losing no more colonies this year. I'm trying everything. Everything.
That was too funny. I can't even imagine. That's definitely a great suggestion, people. If you have your family with, tell them, okay, you guys are going to the hotel. The beehives are coming in the house with me. That's awesome. That's when you know that you're passionate about something, right? Poor Susie. I'm so sorry. Well, okay. Well, I think we're coming into the closing of these questions. We have a couple more hanging out in the question and answer and in the chat, so we will be getting to those. What is the relationship between our food production, and bees, and why take care of them? Why are they so important?
Wow. As a farmer, I almost feel ashamed to say that I didn't know how important bees were to the environment. And the more I get into it, and especially I remember seeing a video once, and they were like separating the amount of food that's produced with bees from the foods that were produced without bees. And when I looked at what was on the table, I was like, that's absolutely nothing. Like, we really don't appreciate the value of it. I watched a video on YouTube where there's a certain area in China where there's actually no bees. And so the farmers were literally going in with like those small brushes and feathers and so forth, and they were hand pollinating all the flowers, hand pollinating. And I said to myself, that's incredible. We've had people that just killing bees for a long time, and we don't and no one's teaching us the value of bees. So that's why one of the things that I'm pushing is getting into bees, getting more experience, knowing how to beekeep, because I would love to go into the schools and start to teach kids how important these bees are, so they can take it back home to their parents and start to build a relationship so we can understand how important bees are. Without bees, oh God, it's bad. It's really, really bad.
Show the kids bee movie. Bad news.
Yeah, and probably show the kids a bee movie. That'd be one of the cool things that can definitely be shown, because it's a harsh reality when nature isn't involved anymore, and we thinking that we can find anything that we could consume on the shelves, and when we go in there, we realize there's nothing left.
Yeah, it's going to be a harsh reality for us, for sure. So I think these conversations are great, and I thank you, Luckner, for taking the time to talk to us about all this, because we really want this to be, I think, the end goal, right?
80%, correct.
Yeah, we need to take care of our bees. We need to start, cross sector between farming and beekeeping, and really involve it even more within our food production. And as we saw, it's definitely another source of income that you can definitely work around and explore. So
yes,
I think that's basically the last question we have. We have the closing picture with Luckner and Susie. Thank you guys so much for, again, taking the evening to share with us a little bit of your experience and what you've learned throughout your time in beekeeping. So I'm actually going to go ahead and jump into all of the questions that we have. Ooh, I'm excited. There's a couple of really great questions and comments. Thank you all again for being with us this evening. It's been quite a pleasure and a very lovely conversation. So let's go and see. We have some questions from Tim. Hi, Tim Hicks from Abaco. Do you use foundation in your frames?
Yes, I do. I actually do. I use plastic foundation, and I use the regular wax foundation. So I use a little bit of both. And I find that if you can probably use a starter strip as well, too, a strip of wax. But I tend to like to help the bees out so I can get them to build exactly where I want them, because maintenance is very important to me. So that's why I love using foundation.
So definitely there is foundation that you could be using
Yes.
in your frames. All right, next question. I think we already answered this one. Do you use bait in your swarm traps like lemongrass or lavender? So I think you did.
Yes, lemongrass essential oils. Yes, I use that. So the Swarm Commander is one of the things that's been promoted so heavily, and the success rate of some of the people that have been talking about it, I really think that I would like for it to be really high. So I would take some lemongrass and like rub the box down with it, and then I would take my Swarm Commander, which is lemongrass oil, and basically like spray it in there and basically get the bees to become more familiar with it, including with some of the propolis and so forth. So all that stuff actually helps a lot.
Fantastic. So you definitely have also like natural options too that you could be using. Let's see, Christina is asking us, do you use queen excluders, like split your swarm box top bottom?
No, I don't. No, I don't. The thing is, the reason why I haven't used swarm queen excluders is because when you use queen excluders, you're working like when the bees are trying to work their way onto the top box, they're really like tearing up their wings and they're damaging the bees. And I've heard that there was many instances where people said that it really works the bees really hard and it shortened their lifespan. So with that, I said I wasn't much of the fan for it. So I haven't been using. I have queen excluders, but I don't really use them like that. No, I don't.
Okay, that's interesting.
And the way I design my boxes, I can't put queen excluders in them unless I would put them on a frame and then separate the box like how I was thinking I should do. But then when I look at the pros and cons, I said, nah, I'm gonna keep it out.
So that's cool. So it really depends on the design of the box, right? If you want
to
kind of That's awesome. All right, another question here. Once you remove a hive, how do you stop bees from going back to the same place? That's a really good question.
If it's, for instance, I remembered I removed a beehive for one of my friends, and I removed this beehive, I cleaned it off and so forth, and I said, make sure close it up properly. Make sure close it up properly, and they didn't. And so the next couple months, the bees came back. If it's a good location, the bees are going to come back. Like it's just prime real estate. So the bees are always going to come back to the location. So the best thing you could do is seal areas. If you in your home or whatever, you notice that the bees was inside of it, seal it properly. Like cover that box, seal it. I at home, I take a caulking, like the foam, and I spray all the cracks because I've been to all these houses I've seen, but I use the foam and I foam all the bottom, any little cracks that I see, I foam all that stuff up to keep the bees out. Because when swarm season comes, because I have about 10 to 15 colonies in the back, the bees are coming into the house and they're trying to find any little crack that they can find so they can actually get inside of it. So if you can basically seal a lot of those cracks, do it, because they're gonna come. The last thing I usually tell some of my friends to use is that bees, the sense of smell is very powerful. So if you take something like, if you see a swarm that's coming, you can probably spray gas on on whatever it is. They would tend to leave that area because they don't like the smell of the gas. So that's another thing that you can use, but I don't recommend doing it. Seal your house as much as you can, and that always works. That's always a plus.
Yeah, that's another recommendation that I heard one of our beekeepers say is you actually take that whole hive and you take it at least 2 miles out of the area for maybe 2-3 days, and they should stay in the same place and not go back to their original location.
Yeah. Like I just removed a colony. I just removed a colony. Okay, sorry. I just removed a colony just recently from a neighbor like right down the street from me. And what I should have done is I supposed to bring the colony home and I supposed to close them into the box for about 2 or 3 days, and then with feed. And then after that, the bees would have to reorient themselves or whatever. I let them go. I said, okay, you know what? I think I'm far away from the house and so forth. So all the forager bees that was in the box, they went straight back to the guy house again. And that was a mess.
Wow. That's impressive.
I was like, crap, I should have known better than this. But they went straight back to this home, all the forager bees and all the nurse bees that was in the box, they pretty much stayed and went to work and they stayed. But all the forager bees that knew the location, they went straight back.
That's super interesting. So yeah, they're smart. They will outsmart you.
They will find their way back.
Another suggestion here from Grant Lee from USVI. He says that he sprays diesel or old oil in the cavity before he seals it up. So yeah, definitely
That's a good
something
idea.
that can like confuse them and change, you know, their sense of smell or anything like that to
Yeah.
prevent them to going that back.
Yeah, that'll work. But then you literally have to constantly be doing that, because after a while that scent is going to be gone. It won't last forever, and that's something to bear in mind as well too. So
Yeah.
seal those cavities if you can.
Absolutely. Another question coming in from Christina: what do you feed your bees?
Feeding is like there's two things that I do. If I just remove a hive out of someone's backyard or someone's house, I tend to feed them sugar syrup. And the reason why I feed them sugar syrup is because they need to mend all those things onto the frame. So they need the energy for it. So sugar water is always a plus. Like that's a must. Like the 2-to-1 ratio of sugar water. And I try to make it as syrupy as possible so the bees can go, and that gives them the fuel and the energy in order for them to mend the box, plus defend the box as well too. So you need to feed them when they go into these new boxes and so forth. So that would be one that I do it. I feed my bees. So I feed my bees sugar syrup. And then from time to time, depends on what the season is like, I put pollen parties and so forth inside of it. So you can do that. Also, you can take slices of banana. So if you have a really ripe bananas, I have sliced really ripe bananas and put it on top of the colony of the bees, but they literally suck the sugar out of that.
Oh,
So
nice.
all that stuff actually works. I remember this is funny because I remember World Central Kitchen came to the Bahamas, and they were having a bee problem, and one of the chefs on the island said, I know a guy, a beekeeper. So he called me, and when I came down, they had the bananas out, and the bananas are really ripe. So the bees were literally going after bananas. And he said, like, listen, we can't get rid of these bees. How do we get rid of these bees? I told him, there's no queen here. It's just the bananas are so sweet that they love the smell of bananas, and they kept attacking it. So they had to get rid of the boxes. They put them in the different locations of what some of them, when they couldn't really get the bees off, I took them with me, put them in the car, which was a lot of bees. And then I pretty much took it, and the bees flew off, and I took the bananas and I fed my bees. And that was during hurricane season. So I fed the bees with those bananas.
Wow. So during hurricane season, they were looking for a ripe banana. And that's interesting because one of our participants, Christina, says that she thought banana smell was stressful for bees.
No. And the reason why I said that is because they, like, where they have a location where there's feeding people, the bees went for that box, and they was on that. Like, you couldn't even see the bananas. That's how crazy they were on top of those bananas. So if they had a problem with it, they wouldn't have been consuming it, but they loved that stuff. Yeah, and this was after Durham, and there wasn't much flowers and everything around. So that was one of the reasons why they're gonna go for anything that they can find.
Huh, that's very interesting. Brantley Samuel talks about watermelon as another option to feed them. So that's interesting, that whole thing about the bananas. Maybe we can do a deeper dive, but if they were swarming the bananas, that means they were liking them, huh?
Yeah.
That's cool. So within another question that we have, in regards to taking care of the hives during the storm. In the trailer, would you block the entrance, wrap the bees for the storm? Would you actually block it out?
Yeah, because one of the things I want to do with mine is I want to put vents, a lot of vents around. So I don't want to leave the door open, because if you leave the door open, all the wind is going to go in there and really go crazy. So if you can put a lot of vents in your trailer, and which is something that I'm investing into doing for this trailer that I have here, put a lot of vents in it, and then the bees would actually have, because they just need the air. And vents in the bee box too. And the bee box actually have vents as well too. So that I build them with vents, but you need the air to circulate inside the trailer, as much air as they can, before the next day, and you can actually go into them. But don't put too much of them inside there, because they tend to overheat. So you don't want to put, if you have 87 colonies, you don't want to put 87 colonies inside this trailer and have them going crazy and overheating, and it gets really hot inside it. That's a problem. I would more or less put them inside the house. I'd probably move everyone in the trailer and then go put my bees in the house. That would be more air circulating, I believe.
So the family stays in the trailer.
Yeah.
You're talking about a hotel first. Come on. What's going on? All right. So let's see. At this point, we don't have any other open questions, but I definitely encourage everybody that's tuning in to take advantage of the opportunity and talk with our subject matter expert of the evening. So any questions that you might have about bees, how to take care of them, how to move them, how to have more of them, now is the time. Let's take maybe a couple more minutes so we have maybe more questions rolling in. And again, thanking you, Luckner, for taking the time to speak with us and to share all of these amazing resources and suggestions and tips and tricks on how to use or how to take care of our bees and continue educating about them. So let's see. I think we might have a couple maybe comments. That's cool. Thank you so much, Grantley, for joining us. Very honored to connect with
Grantley,
you.
I noticed that you do a lot of removals in the day. I tend to do all my removals at night. I can't. These bees on the island are so aggressive. I don't know how you do it. And with no suit, you're impressive.
I think the bees in the region also differ, right? So definitely the
Yeah.
species, some species can be a bit more aggressive than others. So that might be definitely something or a reason why we have Grantley hanging out with the bees more chilled.
Yeah. I remember that one of my instructors that came down from Atlanta, and I remember he came down and he was like, you know what, he works with thousands of hives and so forth. So all the students were in class. We were a couple of weeks and I think we did a 4-month program afterwards. So he came in, he was like, I don't need to wear a suit and so forth and whatever. And he wasn't wearing a suit. And so we went in to get this hive off a tree. I swear to this day, we can't find that guy. He ran into the bushes and we never saw him again. Those bees were so aggressive. They chased him till, Lord, it was funny. It was funny. So these bees on our island, they are so aggressive. They are aggressive.
They are
aggressive.
That's intense. I have heard that in Puerto Rico, we do have maybe more docile bees. They are Africanized, but they are like hybrid. So although they can be very intense, they might not be as intense as the ones you guys have in the Bahamas.
Yeah, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, I find that the more honey a hive has, the more aggressive it gets.
That might
so
be...
that's one of the things to consider. The more honey in this colony, the more aggressive they become, and they are bad. When I say they are bad, they are bad.
Hey, they gotta defend their honey, you know. We have a couple of questions. Let's see in comments. Davinia is asking us, have you considered changing what you feed your bees to get a different taste to your honey?
No, I have not. But I know of a few, like one of my mentors in Florida, what they do is they take them to lavender fields, they take them to peach, almonds, and so forth. And they say that these bees actually have different tastes of them. But because our island is so small, I can't, a bee could fly up to 5-mile radius. So they can get whatever they want. And if you put something inside there, like you put the sugar syrup and you pretty much add different flavors into it, maybe it'll change the taste of it. I don't know. I've never tried it. It's not something that I see myself getting into at this moment. No.
But there's definitely ways to maybe kind of do that, right? If you have a farm that is maybe coconut trees or maybe just one type of crop or several crops, they might be able to harvest the honey or to make the honey.
Yeah, but like I was telling one of my friends and they were like, well, you know what, you shouldn't feed bees sugar and so forth. I told them, like, if you go to the schools, you find all the bees are in the garbage can and they're sucking up sodas like crazy. They go for the easiest thing that they can find. So anything that you can find, bees, they love easy access to food, and anything quick and easy that they can find, they take it back to the colony.
Yeah.
So if sugar's there, they're gonna sugar water. If they find Coke soda, they're gonna drink that. If Pepsi, whatever it is, they're gonna drink it up.
Yeah, they have a lot. They'll take the sugar out of whatever they can, right?
Yeah.
I think we had a couple questions that I might have overlooked in the chat, so I'm going through them really quickly. We do have a comment about the aggressiveness of bees. Pam is sharing that Freeport has had bee attacks of people reported over the years, ever since the African bee strain came this way. So yeah, I think that's one thing that has happened throughout the region in general. But they are more productive. That's one thing that the beekeepers have attested to.
But most of the bee attacks that we've had, like, these bees don't just randomly attack people. Like for the last gentleman that I remember that really passed, he was slashing and trying to cut at the bushes and so forth. And he ran into the colony, didn't know it was there. It probably buzzed and warned him, and he was getting too close, and then they attacked him. And I remember when one of my friends who actually went there, they had to go into the house and take him out and so forth because the bees were all over him. And it's just, if you run it, like for another time I had one of my friends who was on a tractor, and his prime example is the bucket hive. The bucket was on the floor, and he was cleaning the area with the bucket with the tractor. And so he ended up pushing on it, and he had to run and leave the tractor running and run away from the bees because the bees just went out. It's just, if you hit their colony, they tend to get aggressive. So they're going to defend that colony as best as they can. And you find most of the wild bees are going to be aggressive, or they're more likely to be more aggressive. The more honey they got, the bigger the colony, and so forth. It's just different things put into play. Because I've seen bees living in people's homes, and they've been living with them for years, and the bees have never attacked them at all.
Yeah, so it's really a matter of like, yeah, figuring out. I've also heard that, loud noises tick them off.
Yeah.
As well as if you're wearing darker colored clothing.
Yeah, that too.
They think it's like an animal that's trying to get
like a bear. So they're natural predators like bears. So anything that they see dark or whatever. That's why I love to do my removals at night. I love doing removals at night simply because the bees can't see, and all of them are gonna be at home. No one's coming back. So you can get rid of all that colony one time. When you do them in the day, they're all flying all over the place. They can see, and they're attacking everything in sight. And they don't play. So I don't want anyone to get hurt, and that's the reason why I don't remove bees in the day.
Yeah, Pam is adding up that when they sting, there's an attack. They really do sense the smell. So I think once one of them attacks, it kind of moves them into attack mode. I think that's
and also and it's hence the reason. And Susie is saying this is a good point too. One of the things to do is after every removal, you need to wash your bee suits. A lot of people don't like to wash their gloves, and they take their time to do them. During removals, I try to wash my bee suits like right away, because that the smell of the stingers and all that stuff that's on that glove and so forth. When you go into another colony or a really calm colony that you've been working for a while, once they smell that pheromone, they get into attack mode, and they start attacking. They go crazy. So they don't like that smell. That smell tells them, let's go and attack, and they go at it.
No, you don't want that. Absolutely not.
No.
We did have a question also from Pam. She was asking that if you sell beeswax to artisans to make soaps, candles, and the liking.
No, I have not, but I have a few that's asking me for it. What the thing what I do with mine is that I would take some of my I render some of my wax. So that's one of the things I do. When I render the wax, what I do is I would take like strip of it, and I would put them in some of my bait boxes. I would put it inside some of my swamp traps and so forth. I would put them out, and then I could use them in that retrospect. So I don't tend to sell like that, but I don't have much, but I do believe when I get into when I start doing a lot of extractions and so forth, and I have a lot of it, the excessive amount of it, I probably would sell a bit. My freezer has a lot of it right now, but I don't want to sell it. All it out right now. I really want to use it, so that's why I haven't done that so far.
But there's definitely a venture there for anyone who's interested. You can totally target that type of business. There's a lot of artisans that are always looking for beeswax, so that's another great way to generate income from beekeeping. Okay, definitely. I think we have kind of been reaching the closing for this, because we don't have any more questions. I don't know if anyone else has anything else that they'd like to share, something else that you would like to talk about, or Luckner, anything else, any closing remarks that you would like to provide to our participants this evening?
I would say if you're gonna get into really like I want to be doing this for a long time to come. So if you want to basically be doing beekeeping, especially if you want to be doing it for a long time, I recommend people get into some of the horizontal hives, because as you get older, like for instance, another prime example that I forget to talk about was when you're lifting these boxes and I remember someone made a joke about this once. They said that he met an older beekeeper, and the older beekeeper said that all the money that he made from beekeeping, he's spending it on his back right now, because his back gave away. Because he's like, some of these boxes are 60, 70 pounds of honey. You're lifting them constantly constantly. And so he ended up hurting his back, and he's spending all that money, basically recouping it to basically pay for medical bills and so forth. So if you can basically build a box where, for me, I'm thinking long-term. So I build horizontal boxes where these boxes are long. There's no lifting to these boxes. So once these boxes are down, I know that they're not going to cost me any problems and any issues long. So I'm thinking long-term for this stuff. So if you can, those line stock boxes, they're really, really efficient. They're really handy, but they're more for commercial beekeepers that moving in to go and basically pollinate almond trees in Florida, or in California, and going back to Florida to do oranges and so forth, whatever it is. But for the backyard, or someone that's gonna have a stationary apiary, not to get into it because it's their choice, but look into some of these longer boxes where you don't have to do much lifting. I think that's gonna be the thing that a lot of us have to consider. And a lot of bending. So I make sure my boxes are high enough where there's no bending. So yeah, that is correct.
Mm-hmm. So definitely some food for thought there. If you want to continue working with your bees for the long term, if you're in this for the long haul, let's think about our own health and well-being, because without a beekeeper, there's no beekeeping, right? So
there is not.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Definitely a great suggestion for all of us hearing you out here. A couple of thank yous, and some people agree, definitely facts. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Definitely thank you for the opportunity for everything that World Central Kitchen actually did. Whoa, I want to show this. I haven't posted about this yet. I want to show this. I think this is really cool.
Go. That's a big trailer. Again, thanking you everybody for joining us this evening. It's definitely been super fun hanging with you all and connecting our beekeepers in Grand Bahama, our beekeepers in the USVIs. Very much excited to be part of this conversation with you all.
So this is actually something I'm gonna promote. I'm gonna put a pin out here. This is actually called a hive butler. I don't know if most people are gonna get into this eventually, but when you're gonna go and see, it's just a bin, right?
Okay.
But what this bin actually has is it's designed to actually house, when you go on your removals, it actually houses frames. Ooh. So when you go in sometimes you have frames and so forth, and you bake with brood and so forth, you can actually take them and put them inside here. It's almost like having them in a box. And once you take them, you can actually seal them away, and you can put them in the back of the truck, in the back of whatever, and in the car. You won't have to worry about it. And it's basically compact like a proper boxing, and it's sealed. So I recommend people get into this and look into these hive buttons. These are really, really cool. And this was something that I got from World Kitchen as well too. So this is gold. And there's different parts of it. So if anyone want to get into it, like when you go and extract honey and the bees are all over the place, you can actually take a lot of your frames with the honey and just drop it inside here and pretty much seal it. And it seals really well, and you can just take it with you and put it on the ground, and you wouldn't have to worry about this stuff. So this is really, really cool.
And one of them has a drain at the bottom.
And one of them actually has a drain to the bottom, and it's right in the back there as well too. So you can actually once you then take all the honey out, the excess honey that's left on the frames, it actually has a drain, so you can let it drain for a day or two, and then you can actually open the I forget what they call this, the vent, and it pretty much drains out and so forth. So it's really these are really, really cool. I recommend people I want to do a video on this and talking about how efficient this is. I found that this is really, really helpful. Really helpful. Hivebutler.com if you guys want to check that out. That's really cool.
I just shared in the chat Luckner's Facebook page. It's Grand Bahama Backyard Farmers. Feel free to check it out and follow him. He does have a very active social media, so you will be checking out all that he's doing about bees and beekeeping, and maybe some of the videos that he's speaking of right now, you might be able to check out there later. So again, I just shared that via the chat. You can check it out and start following Luckner. And if you have any more questions, definitely you can either share them via the chat right now, or last minute questions, you can also reach out to him via his Facebook page. So you will be having a couple more followers, probably, Luckner.
That's fine. I need to do more on social media, and I will soon.
Yeah, that's a whole full-time job there.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you again for sharing a lot of your valuable knowledge, insight. I'm so happy that we had this conversation on World Bee Day. What better to do than to speak with one of our very own beekeepers on this and to raise awareness by talking to you and learning more about bees. So again, thank you so much. So we will be then wrapping up for the evening. Thanking you again, all of you that were with us and that were part of this great conversation. We will be continuing on with our educational calendar. So check out our social media, check out our newsletters, email, everything that we send out, because we will be continuing on sharing a lot of great business skills for you all. So again, thank you, Luckner.
No problem.
I know you were hanging out there. Have a great evening, everybody, and it will be till next time.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.